What do they know that I don't?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi, everyone. We'll wait about 5 more minutes and then we'll get started.
Great. Thanks, Patrick.
Okay, great. We're about 5 minutes after noon Eastern, so we'll go ahead and get started. So everyone, welcome to the first virtual user group meeting of the AWS User Groups of Florida. Just to recap, everyone, if you're on a mobile or desktop app or web page, you should see some slides up and running. I'm sure if no one sees that, they'll let me know. So this is our first virtual meetup after 6 years of in-person meetups, our last meetup being just at the beginning of March. So it's been a little bit of time. And to sort of recap how our user group works, the idea here is we get together. Pandemics obviously made that a little bit of a challenge, getting together in person, hence the virtual nature of the meetup. But the idea here is this is going to allow us to have a larger group, really comprising what's hopefully folks representing most of Florida and beyond. So the idea here is we're going to use this as sort of the test bed for how these work, how the platform works, and then look to get these scheduled every month. We're really open to anyone who'd like to present on nearly any topic, and we're also open to recommendations or suggestions around topics and formats. Today we'll basically follow the single topic format. But can definitely look at other formats in future meetups, chunking it down to smaller bits, lightning rounds, things like that. Generally, after each of our meetups, we'll post the presentations from the presenters to our meetup page, available via SlideShare or YouTube. So this is being recorded. And we also have a user group Slack, so we can, again, stay in touch throughout. So given the virtual nature of today's meetup, I can't necessarily see everyone raising their hands. So right now you'll see that you're muted. You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask questions or interrupt along the way, but we're also using the Slido platform. So if you go to sli.do, on the front page, it's going to ask for an event. Event 30920 is ours. And you can actually use this to ask questions interactively through the presentation. And I'll also use it as well to push questions to the audience, so polls and the like. So that's essentially it. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So the main topic of today's meetup is around an Amazon Connect service called Contact Lens. Contact Lens is essentially an extension of another AWS service called Amazon Connect. So as an experiment, we'll see who's been following along so far. I've just sent a pull out through Slido, essentially asking how familiar is this audience with contact center operations and technology. Based on this feedback, all right, I've got 2 responses already, and 100% so far are familiar with all 3. That's pretty great. So based on the feedback, and I've got a series of questions actually up on the screen and on the Slido platform, we'll figure out how deep we want to go and in what areas we want to go in today's presentation. Okay, great. So so far of the response, we've got a fair amount, well, 5 responses familiar with all 3. Also some feedback in chat. mixed bag, not familiar at all, and one working for 15 years in the contact center space. Excellent. So we'll balance between the two. So let's go ahead. We'll kick out our next question here. Always the fun one. How familiar are you with AWS? Oh, there's an old name. Hey, Carlos. Alrighty. So again, pretty decent experience of the respondents so far. Either working with it, have hands-on experience with it, use it for production at multiple organizations or on multiple workloads. That's excellent. We'll give this one a few seconds, then we'll pop to what I promise is the final question. And then I'll actually start presenting real content. All right, final question here is just high-level categorization. What level of familiarity do you have, or what AWS service families are you familiar with? All right, great. So it looks like from a participation-wise, we have generally an audience that are familiar with AWS, variety of services, which is great, familiar with Connect to a degree. So what I'll do, I've got a few introductory level slides around Connect. We'll just kind of breeze through those to get everyone up to speed. And then I'll hop into Contact Lens. We'll talk a little bit about it, compare and contrast it, the why, and then we'll jump into a demonstration of how it works and its capabilities. So Amazon Connect is essentially a contact center platform, or ACD, as a service. So, for those who don't necessarily have familiarity with Connect or contact centers in general, chances are you interact with them on potentially a frequent basis, whether it's calling your favorite company, Xfinity or Comcast. Or maybe interacting, with a certain e-commerce brand through chat, or even push-style messaging, either through an app or texting. So traditionally, this has been very much a market brand-dominated area, generally very complex in terms of how the parts and pieces are fit together. And more so, actually, and for everyone who's familiar with AWS, right, and some of the challenges solved by public cloud, the challenges in capacity planning, buying capacity, et cetera, right? So, and what AWS or Amazon will typically do is take a commodity style service. Again, think virtual machines, and make it available in a consumption-based model. So that's essentially what they've done with Amazon Connect. It has a lot of the same characteristics you'd expect in any other typical contact center platform. Again, as a consumer of that, being able to call a number or initiate a chat, being able to interact both in a self-service manner, through what may be traditionally is called an IVR. But more so, it's taken what again was sort of a CapEx type model, licensing per agent, and turned it into consumption. So really, as someone who's operating a contact center, you're really paying per minute per message. You're not having to plan out or buy ahead. Again, the same cloud computing capabilities that I'm sure most folks are familiar with. So more so, and one of the questions or options in the pool was familiarity with serverless and a few other categories of services, right? So the key capability of a business app or business platform like Connect is the ability to integrate with your existing technology footprint. Again, for those that are familiar with operating a contact center, dealing with typically quantities or bulk of agents, integration with a directory service like SAML or Active Directory is key. More so, what I'd consider a key differentiator is the agent interface. Actually, all interfaces for that matter are entirely web-based, leveraging Chrome or Mozilla. The actual audio stream is via WebRTC, and the chat stream via WebSocket. So again, very internet designed style methods of transmitting and receiving the audio or text payload. And actually, just got a first great question. How does Connect compare to Twilio or Azure? So I'm most familiar with Twilio, so to maybe compare and contrast the two. Twilio essentially provides a platform by which developers can build on. Around this time last year, they actually introduced a contact center platform. However, based on some of the comparison analysis we've done, it really is geared more towards the developer style person. Amazon Connect, on the other hand, I'd consider almost a balance between a developer-friendly app and a business-friendly app. Oftentimes the way we engage with customers that are integrating or running Amazon Connect is they have the power and the capability to make changes right to the agent or the customer experience, onboard agents, offboard agents, generate reports, even modify some of the IVR or contact or call flows, right? So that's that balance there. You don't necessarily want to restrict your business to having to put in change requests for development teams to make those changes. So a lot of the other characteristics you would expect, queues, et cetera, but the key power of Amazon Connect, for those not familiar with it, are what they refer to as contact flows. This is essentially, the equivalent of what may be traditionally called an IVR or interactive voice response. And this is where you can actually control what the caller hears and sees along the way. So these work with both chat-style interactions and voice-style interactions. The messaging they may hear while waiting for an agent to respond, as well as the options that they may be presented with, all the way into self-service and bot capabilities, right? So from within a contact flow, you could actually invoke a Lambda function You can invoke a Lex bot, and you can really, try to, as much as possible, offer a self-service experience to the caller, and then eliminate some of the burdensome, repetitive activities that the agent handling the call ultimately may need to handle. So as I mentioned, this is done through either Lambda, through Lex, platforms that many are familiar with already. And then more so on the agent side, the agent experience, and then the data integration side, you can actually interact. You can build your own custom wrapper around the soft phone and integrate it into a CRM platform like Salesforce or ServiceNow, or even build sort of your own type of CRM, integrate with a homegrown CRM and the like. In addition to having a capability of data streaming, it also has a fairly robust and growing set of APIs you can use to interact with some of the back-end things. I won't spend too much time on this one, but as part of course, operating a contact center platform, one of the key purposes, and we'll talk a little bit about the history of this because it's very interesting, is the actual metric and data collection, right? So how do you measure what your agent's performance and productivity look like? Opportunities for training, for coaching, right? How do you know that the agents are on the same page with how and what they should convey to the customer? And then more so on the customer side, how do you know the customer's getting the optimal experience, right? Whether it's through self-service or routing to and interacting with an agent. So I have a few kind of what I call 200, 300 level slides. I think in the interest of time, what I'll do is I'll skip through some of these. That way we could leave enough time for the fun part of this, and that's contact lens. But essentially what I've done here is summarize ultimately where the data that's emitted by Connect lives. Again, you'll see these are common AWS services like S3 and Kinesis. We talked a little bit about the event streams. Again, emitted through Kinesis as a JSON object. So you can actually see the life of the call, what's referred to as a contact, using a unique identifier referred to as a contact ID, as well as the agent event. And this is key, right? Again, when it comes to measuring agent performance, understanding, what transpired along the call and even before and after the call in terms of agent status changes, log in, log out, et cetera. These are also some of the key integration points that third-party solutions that tie into Amazon Connect leverage. Workforce management and QA platforms such as Calibrio, Agile Time, and the like. Kinesis, of course, for those that are familiar with it, provide quite a variety of different destinations that you can emit this data to, whether it's traditional data warehouse in the form of Redshift, Elasticsearch, maybe more for text-based and fuzzy-based searching, even some of your traditional SIMs like Splunk. One of the key areas here that I think offers tremendous value in terms of integration is actually emitting to the contact record information to Lambda function. And not only can you perform data transformations, but you can also use it as a trigger and the triggering data to actually call a Lambda function after the interaction has ended. So this has a lot of value in actually informing your CRM of a status change, perhaps performing batch processing, or even perhaps queuing up a ticket or work item to perform follow-up with that caller. As I mentioned, there's really two flavors of SDKs offered. I've got some examples here. Again, the slides will be on SlideShare afterwards. We have the JavaScript SDK for communicating and working with and manipulating the agent interface. And then when I've labeled chat, it's really more of a generic Connect SDK that's extremely extended to support some of the chat functionality. So I've got an example here around how that works. What I'll actually do here is I'll just pop a little bit to some of the operational monitoring pieces. Again, some of the key for those that are actually running contact center platforms, sort of above or below the queue level, depending on how you look at it. But basically, how do I know my contact center platform is healthy? So Connect emits a number of different metrics, either via CloudWatch metrics, even CloudWatch logs, where you can see what happens step by step through a contact flow, what happens with the Lambda functions, and more so rolling those CloudWatch logs up to metrics. So again, you can trigger an alarm on certain activities and behaviors. So onto Contact Lens. So I stole this straight off of AWS's website. I don't think I could have done a better job of saying it, but there's a ton of words here. To me, right, when I initially think of Contact Lens, I think really of a product that may be comparable to some of the other AI-powered QA platforms available in the market, right? So the use case here is really understanding, did the agent say what they should have said? Did they not say what they shouldn't have said? Did the caller sound frustrated, right? A lot of great data and insights, but more so used very, very reactively. So Contact Lens has taken a lot of that, but it's built on top of it, right? So yes, sentiment. Yes, compliance around customer conversations that you could use, right, for training agents, replicating successful interactions. But more so here is trends, and I'm going to talk about a pretty cool use case in a few slides around that. So what's sentiment analysis, right? So we'll step back a little bit, right? So even more words, and thanks Wikipedia for taking care of this for me. But essentially, sentiment analysis is really looking at the makeup of the text in the conversation. And again, this could apply to a voice interaction, you calling. This could you calling into a contact center. This could apply to an agent making outbound calls, or again, it could apply to a chat and any other sort of API extended interactions, right? So again, much like contact flows with Lex and Lambda, Contact Lens can handle really all those channels as well. So really the key here is let's extract that audio, turn it into text. Let's analyze that text and understand the characteristics of it, really taking that conversation and mapping it. So for those of you who are maybe not as familiar around some of the contact center technology and some of the operational aspects of running a contact center, I threw together like a very simplified history, right? So contact centers now have been around for, I believe, about 40 to 50 years, 4 to 5 decades, in one form or the other, right? Obviously, technology has changed quite a deal, but I would imagine since the start, right, one of the purposes of a contact center or call center is not just servicing the customer, but also understanding how do you do a better job in doing so, right? So what initially maybe started as tabulation, notes and desk side monitoring, right? Really manual, arduous processes turned into more statistical measurements, targeting and tracking KPIs, how long the agent spends on the phone, how long a customer spends on hold, and a variety of other metrics, into analyzing ticketing and even doing remote monitoring and QA. Better, right? We're starting to get to some level of scale, but now we have this problem with consistency. And the whole idea around QA scorecardings intended to solve some of that, right? But you still have this human factor involved, right? So here we are 10 plus years ago when we're still people listening and people reviewing statistics and notes and tickets coming out of these interactions. Income speech to text. So rudimentary, take the conversation, turn it into words, have someone still analyze that. Maybe you could start to automate a little bit, doing searches, but doesn't really deal with the fuzzy and ambiguous. And then finally, speech analytics. That's really where I'd say, we started to see a change in this space, again, a decade plus ago. Fast forwarding to today, where I'd say the biggest improvements have been around accuracy, adaptability, handling a wide range of characteristics of data, and more so how quickly that could be turned around. So while Amazon Connect today doesn't yet support real-time analytics on the conversation, that is something that is planned for introduction in the future, right? From a timing perspective, in a lot of the calls that I've made specifically for this meetup today, it was a matter of minutes after the call ended before that data was available. So why Contact Lens? We talked a little bit about some of this already, right? So Contact Lens is an AWS native solution. Granted, you also have the ability to leverage other products available on the marketplace. Cost-wise is probably about the same, right? You can also build your own solution. Amazon actually has a solution already out there that uses Transcribe. This actually costs about 62.5% just off the Transcribe costs alone. So even if you want to, and we'll talk a little bit about this, do more than Contact Lens does with your calls, you could still use it for transcribing those calls and then pumping that into your own solution at a savings. It's obviously quite integrated with Connect. We'll talk a little bit about that. Key values there are going to be, onboarding, permissioning users is the same, cleaner, more responsive type interface, and the same exact integration approaches, right? So the data sources, it writes out to S3, the eventual availability of APIs. And the coolest thing here, right? So for basic call recording or chat transcription in Connect is free. You pay for the S3 cost. That's a few dollars a month. Contact Lens has an additional per minute or per second cost that still is, again, a fraction of the Connect cost, right? But you are paying more for it. So, depending on the size of your contact center operations, the economics of those operations, et cetera, you can selectively enable and disable the analytics. I've got a quick little shot here. I'll show you of that. And then finally, what does it do? And I think this is a great time really where we'll jump over here. I'll see how many tries it takes to get my screen shared out, and actually should be good to go. And then we'll actually kind of walk through how this works. So up on my screen right now, if you're not already familiar with it, this is sort of what the connect interface looks like if you're not an agent. I'll sometimes refer to it as the supervisor or admin interface, but those constructs don't really exist. Everything is sort of role-based access control, so you can give as much or as little permission as possible. But this is a basic contact flow I've set up. All it does is you call a number, and it basically routes you straight to a queue. If an agent's logged in, the agent answers. Not very exciting, and really, you know, pales in comparison to what Connect can do. But the key here is this block. This block is what allows you to enable and disable recording, as well as analytics, right? So there's a variety of ways you can approach this. For most users, you just turn this on and let it do its thing. Maybe you don't want to do 100%. You could do all sorts of you know, varieties of fractions based on the type of call, percentages, you know, even whether it's an inbound or outbound call. But literally getting all this deep analytical capability is as simple as adding this box to the call flow, ticking this box, selecting the language. So there's a few key things here that I want to talk about just to illustrate how Connect and how Contact Lens work behind the scenes, right? So Connect natively, whether it's streaming a call or listening to a call, separates the agent and customer channel, right? So if you're listening to a recorded call on a pair of headphones, you'll hear agent in one side, customer in the other. So what's cool about this is you're able to really see things like, is there over talking, right? Is the agent and customer talking at the same time? As well as actually identify who said what. Agent said this, customer said this, continue onward. More so, capabilities have been added to actually redact sensitive data. And you can even store this redacted data in its native and redacted format, or just one or the other, right? So this would be a situation where there's potentially personal information, payment card information, etc. It more or less nulls it out. So that's it. With this, my contact center in a box is now recording as well as doing analytics on the call. And all that information is basically retrievable in the contact search capability. So I mentioned earlier, there we go. That should be a little bit easier to see. I mentioned earlier that a individual call or chat is referred to as a contact. It's basically described in a record called a CTR, or contact trace record. All that information is retrievable in this contact search field, right? So with Contact Lens, it's extended this. You know, we were able to search by date, we were able to search by queue, agent, caller, etc. Now we can actually look for certain words. We could also look at if that word was used by an agent or a customer. The sentiment score, this is basically -5, -5 being terrible, and +5 being ecstatic, as well as a shift in sentiment, right? So here you could get really granular with the types of calls, the types of callers you might be expecting or anticipating, right? So maybe this is a customer retention type call, right, where the caller is calling and it's not really going to be a great a great start to the call, right? So we could actually evaluate the shift of the sentiment from, you know, being kind of a not great call with the expectation at the end that it's improved because the agent has said or done something or negotiated a middle ground with the caller to address their concerns. We could also look at things like non-talk time, dead air, silence, things that are generally not great customer experience. So I've put up here, again, I made a handful of calls ahead of time to help save on time spent listening to me make calls. And I pulled one up here. And we're going to see that, this is actually not a great call. I guess that's what happens when I talk to myself. So overall customer sentiment was negative, all of it. And we can actually see that of the majority of the call, the non-talk time was pretty high, and probably not necessarily, more of a characteristic of my testing than actually what transpired. So, we see the call started out relatively neutral, and, pretty much middle of the call dropped to, the lowest sentiment score as possible, and then, pretty much ended neutrally. So let's see why. So down here, we actually have combination, again, customer and agent audio. And we could actually play this back. It'll play back just like a typical call recording, as well as the conversation that transpired. One of the questions that was just asked around ascertaining sentiment is, essentially what it's doing here is looking at the verbiage, right? So in my test, I pulled out what would typically be considered a negative sentiment type call, right? So here I am as the agent, happy, thank you for calling. And then the first thing the customer said is basically, I want to cancel my service, right? So cancel having negative connotation is going to be, kind of a negative score. Contact Lens is powered by a few other AWS services like Transcribe and Comprehend, and a lot of the same scoring methodologies used by Comprehend you'll find here as well. And then just to answer another question, current languages supported are both, well, my memory is terrible, so let's look. Should be English and Spanish, but we actually have a few varieties here. So we have both the US, GB, India, and Australian varieties of English, and then, of course, the Spain and US varieties of Spanish. So essentially we see now, right, why this received the negative score it did. More so, you'll see that this is underlined. And this is a relatively short example here, but this underline is basically the issue or the call driver. This is the main topic or main point of the call, right? So for calls that are, multiple minutes in length, rather than having to basically go through the transcription or listen, you could basically drill into why did they call? What's the reason for call? What's the topic of conversation? Again, highlighted here with the bold and the underscore. So the other key thing here, just to scroll up a little bit, is we've got these kind of markers where there was talking, whether it was on the customer or the agent side. This is actually a loudness indicator. So this could allow us to see situations where, customer was yelling, agent was yelling back, and even over talking, right, where one caller's talking over the agent or vice versa. So again, helping us sort of drive into, how the call started, where the call ended, and what in the middle drove that. Other, key area here is going to be this categorization, right? So I could set up rules that look just like this, where I am looking for certain words or phrases either said by the customer, agent, or both parties, or the lack thereof at certain time frames in the call, right? So here I've got a rule. If I see the word cancel, and if I were more creative, I'd come up with a few varieties of cancel. Contact Lens does a little bit of that for us. It will actually tag that call to say that that happened, that those words were mentioned. And then I can, again, further drill in and understand exactly why. That will also be highlighted in some of the raw data here. I'll pull up in a few minutes. Another example of this is maybe this type of call, I'm expecting the agent to possibly perform some form of upsell, right? So I've got a role where I'm basically looking for them to say something like, would you like to add, right? Would you like to add on to that upgrade? Would you like fries with that? So one of the other questions about cost, right? So Contact Lens is basically a per analyzed second, per analyzed minute cost, all in. There's no additional cost except for like the storage of the transcriptions in S3. When I say it's built on Transcribe and Comprehend, you're not having to pay separately for those services. More of an interest point if you're trying to understand, behind the scenes how some of the tech works. Another actually great question that I just see was asked about Contact Lens and its use of Alexa. So that's a really great question, and really, both are technologies that I would say play in the NLP or natural language processing space, but really are intended to solve for two distinct issues, right? Contact Lens is going to look at the interaction that's happening between two parties and make an inference around it. Eventually, as I mentioned, will be a near real-time type inference that could be acted on by, either a supervisor, manager, or lead, bells and whistles and things like that. Whereas Lex is really intended more to be one of those parties, right? So more of a self-service as a caller or consumer. I have a need type item. Lex is real time. Lex is also capable of extracting the bits and pieces of that utterance, that question, and mapping that out to attributes, right? Now, with that said, the two have the potential to play very well hand in hand. And that's actually a use case that we've got a customer that we're working on that with now, that I'll talk about just towards the end of our the demo here. And then another question that's come in around using Contact Lens to invoke a Lambda function. Again, on the roadmap is support for APIs in real time. That would definitely be a hook into being able to invoke a Lambda function. Again, that maybe use case I described. Now, Amazon Connect natively can invoke a Lambda function directly in the contact flow or when the agent gets a call. And that's going to work much like any other Lambda function, data in, data out. And then again, enabling Contact Lens out of the box is basically just adding this block here for set recording and analytics and ticking the box. So yeah, this is kind of an example of an overall negative call. I also have an example here of, sorry for the clicking, a generally neutral call, right? I mean, for the, some types of calls, this might be an ideal outcome, but basically, the purpose of this one is just to demonstrate how some of the redaction capabilities work, right? So I created a sample call where, a credit card number was spoken. And essentially here we have where Contact Lens was successfully able to identify that a credit card number was said, including expiration date and CVV2 code, and redact this from the transcribed audio. Then the last example I have here is just to show a call that starts out not great, but actually ends on a good note, and how that's broken out in terms of overall sentiment. And then more so how we see this, little gray here, and neutral. I have a question about my bill. Happy agent that says, thank you for calling. An unhappy caller that says, well, my bill is way higher than I was expecting. And then sort of the flow of the call. And I mumbled a little bit here, right? So some of the words maybe not make sense, but unhappy customer about their bill. Then agent offers, some sort of item in response, a credit. Customer ends on a happy note, and then the call wraps up. So main purpose here is basically show call starts bad, call ends great. But this is definitely one that maybe gets tagged off as a training example for other folks on the team. So back to the question about Contact Lens and Lex. So working with customers to build out Lex bots, one of the challenges we often run into is building bots that are what we know the caller is going to call about. How do we stay in tune with that? So with Contact Lens, we're actually able to see what happens during a call, right? We could use that to build on trends that we maybe weren't able to predict. That output spit into an S3 bucket as a JSON file. We can actually extract out those themes and use that to extend the capabilities within the LexBot, right? So perhaps we see an uptick in a certain type of call that has to be routed to an agent because we didn't anticipate it. Some sort of situations going on, maybe fulfilling orders, the service you're offering and providing support for is not working. So we could use Contact Lens to identify those trends, and then use that to extend the options provided by the bots and help mitigate the additional or excess call routing to agents, allowing to operate a more efficient contact center. So, all right, we've done the walkthrough, and we're essentially at the end of both the presentation and the demo. Basically in conclusion, if you're familiar with contact centers, not familiar with Connect, Connect takes a completely different approach to how it supports those operational needs and the technology behind it. In simplistic terms, it's pretty easy to get up and running without a heavy investment. And then you could basically adopt an agile approach, right? As you're, using Connect and looking to get more and more out of it, you're able to make those changes by way of contact flows and agent interface, et cetera. Services like Contact Lens, which, is about, I think, GA for about 2 or 3 weeks now, further, increase those capabilities and powers without heavy technical development investment at a consumption-based model. And that's basically it. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're looking to pick these back up now that it's virtual. We could get all of the AWS user groups of Florida to participate. If there's any topics you want to see, anything you want to present, any sort of format or agenda, definitely feel free to share that with us in either the Slack channels or on the Meetup page itself, and we'll definitely be happy to work with you. The one last question I got is essentially time frame for real time. So speech analytics turnaround. So speech analytics works today in sort of a post-call mode. Generally speaking, within a few minutes of the call ending, the analytics have been performed. They basically show up on the CTR contact trace record screen. As far as what the roadmap looks like for real-time analytics, I don't have a definitive date, but I do know that there's screenshots and other material on AWS's public site, which leads me to believe that it's more of a short-term thing. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to see any other questions or feedback that we can answer for the group. Alrighty, looks like that's it. So we'll go ahead and get this wrapped up. We'll get the deck and the video posted, and again, looking forward to next month and the feedback from the community. Thanks again, everyone.